Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson, and welcome back to the MCU Perspectives Zombies Edition. And today we're going to be discussing Episode 3 of Marvel Zombies. So, previously on Marvel Zombies. So, in an attempt to get a transmitter out into space to contact the Nova Corps, Kamala Khan, Blade, Yelena, and the Red Guardian wound up hitching a ride on the city on the ocean, aka the Triskelion, in hopes of getting a lift to New Asgard, as there was supposed to be a ship there that they could take into space so they could, get past the electromagnetic barrier around the Earth so they can send out a signal into space. Along the way, they wound up running into Shang-Chi and his crew, as ever since the zombie outbreak broke out 5 years ago, they've been using the power of the Ten Rings to basically help the helpless, and they're here to basically hitch a ride in the Triskelion as well. And the one in charge of the Triskelion is Baron Zemo, as when the world went to hell, he pretty much just claimed patronage of the place. As such, he allows the heroes on board the Triskelion under the pretense that they don't cause any problems, but in reality, this is actually a ruse. As while the Triskelion for the most part is peaceful, well, Zemo still isn't like heroes, and every once in a while, they have to deal with Namor, who it turns out has been infected with the zombie virus as well. And so they typically like to sacrifice heroes to him in order to placate him, with now being no different, as when he attempts to try and sacrifice Kamala's group to Namor, but unfortunately this ends up backfiring as Kamala's group ends up getting thrown right back into the ship with Namor right behind, and as a result, the Triskelion basically falls, with Zemo ordering everybody to just vacate the premises, run away as fast as they can, and thus it results in a bunch of people getting to escape pods and fleeing, Zemo included, with him intending to leave all the heroes behind, so that because he blames them for this. Eventually, they all manage to catch up with Zemo, with Namor hot on their tail, and while a few more of Shang-Chi's group end up biting the dust, eventually the group is able to get away, but only because the escape pod was jammed, and the only way they could get it unjammed was for one of them to go to the manual controls and unlock it that way, which unfortunately means one of them had to be sacrificed. In this case, Yelena volunteered. And while Alexei ends up beating on the escape pod doors to try and go save his daughter, well, she basically just tells him to live for her, and, well, the escape pod gets jettisoned off, with her staying behind getting ready to face the Horde. As such, the last episode ended with Zemo asking the surviving heroes where they can go, and they basically told him that they needed to go to New Asgard, which is where this episode picks up, of a sort. But like with last episode, we actually do have a flashback opening, as we actually cut back to 5 years prior, and we learned exactly what happened in Wakanda that create that whole electromagnetic barrier around the Earth. As we actually check it, as we get a narrated story as, well, the framing device for this flashback is that in the present day, Spider-Man and Scott Lang are telling a story to some unseen newcomers, and basically what happened was that when Spidey, Scott, and the Black Panther wound up going to Wakanda with the intent of using Wakandan tech to, blanket the Earth with energies from the Mind Stone in order to, cure the zombie plague, well, they find that Wakanda had already fallen. As it turned out, the zombie Thanos had managed to get there first, and he had already made a horde of zombies out of Wakandan citizens. As such, the three heroes had to basically abandon ship as they jumped into the middle of the horde and went to go and try and fight zombie Thanos. But unfortunately, that was easier said than done, because just like in the main universe, zombie Thanos had the Infinity Gauntlet, and the whole reason he was even here was because he wanted to get the Mind Stone. For what reason, I do not know. But ultimately, the heroes did their best to fight Thanos, but even in a zombified state, his power was immense. And unfortunately, while his brain power may not be as slick as it was when he was alive, well, he was learning, and thus he was getting a better handle on the powers of the Infinity Gauntlet and the individual Infinity Stones, which means that the group was slowly losing ground, especially when it began raising more hordes of zombies. Eventually, the tide was turned a little bit with the arrival of Thor, Rocket, and Groot, but that's all it was, a little bit, as all they managed to do was distract Thanos for maybe half a minute before Thanos basically unleashed full power right on the three, and in the process he wound up scarring Thor and completely annihilated Rocket and Groot, so that didn't exactly go well. As such, the group once again did their best to fight against Thanos, and they did fare a bit better, but unfortunately it didn't. Unfortunately, it went as well in this reality as it did in the main MCU timeline. Hold on one second. Apologies, dog wanted attention and she wanted to go out in front, so I might end up pausing again very briefly. But anyway, like I said, basically the battle with Thanos goes just as well in this timeline as it did in the main MCU timeline, and unfortunately, the end result is that Thanos did manage to get his hands on the Mind Stone, which he did end up putting in the Infinity Gauntlet. However, as a result of the battle with Thanos, the core of Wakanda was laid bare, as the Earth itself was shattered, and it led right into the core of Wakandan's vibranium reserves. As such, with Black Panther realizing that basically the world was fucked if zombie Thanos had that much power, did one final hurrah as he wound up charging at Thanos, and having taken a good bit of damage during the battle, his suit was able to sustain enough kinetic energy that he was able to unleash right onto Thanos' face, which in turn added an extra oomph, which pushed Thanos right into the core, with Black Panther riding on top of him. The end result, the pair of them wound up falling into the core, and the energies wound up enveloping them and subsequently destroying the Infinity Stones. So, which did save the world from the threat of zombie Thanos, but also had unintended consequences because, well, remember how in the main MCU timeline, the act of just destroying the Infinity Stones almost killed Thanos. So the fact that all those stones have now been destroyed, have now been completely obliterated, well, it causes a major energy surge, which begins expanding beyond Wakanda, and it's clear that anything that gets caught in the surge is going to die. As such, Spidey and Scott now have to basically try making a run for it, but even they realize they're not going to be making out of this. But before they end up getting annihilated, a sling ring portal opens and the two manage to get through, and it turns out that who saved them were the kindly magicians of Kamar-Taj, and thus, for the last 5 years, that's where they've been staying, and it's actually just some newcomer of Kamar-Taj that Spidey is relaying the story to. However, we don't see that newcomer, as I guess we're the newcomer, as Spidey and Scott are called away by some more magicians, who in turn are letting them know about what's going on with Wanda, as they've been fully aware of her forces for a while, and apparently she's been bolstering them bit by bit, which means that she's preparing for one big assault, and Spidey and Scott are a little nervous if they'll be even able to take her. However, we can get more on that next episode, as we end up cutting back to our heroes as we see the pod that they used to escape from the Triskelion arrive on the shores of, I guess, Greenland, possibly? I don't know. No, but point is, they arrive on a beach, and while for the most part everyone is trying to keep going and stay strong, again, the Red Guardian is almost not willing to go through. He wants to just stay with the ship and just basically drown himself in seawater so that he can be with his daughter again. And it's only through Kamala basically throwing his words back in his face, i.e. every breath we take is for those we've lost, that it does at least rouse Alexei enough that he's able to rise up and follow the group. As such, they do travel further onto the beach, and sure enough, they do end up finding the gates to New Asgard, and it's a very ornate gate, and it's pretty worthy of being called New Asgard, and we see that they're kind of have no problems with the zombie horde yet, as we see that any zombies that try getting close to the gates end up getting impaled by spears, which doesn't kill them, but it certainly must hurt like hell. However, we see the one that throws the spears is the guard of the gate, which in this case is Valkyrie. Only she ain't letting anybody in. New Asgard is supposed to be a haven for the gods on Earth, and, well, she basically, in Valkyrie's point of view, mortals are idiots at this point. After all, their world's gone to shit. The zombies have taken over everything, so she basically is of the opinion of, you guys made this mess, you can lie in it, we're just gonna be over here. Which I find to be a giant F-U to all humanity, but you know what, whatever, I guess, whatever, she can be a bitch. I don't like it, but she's a bitch. As such, the group tries bargaining with Valkyrie to let them in because they need access to whatever ship that they have whatever ships they have, so they can go into space. But Valkyrie isn't listening to any of it, and so she comes down and basically tells them, "Turn around, leave, or I'll flay you all alive." Thankfully, though, it's the intervention of Blade that manages to get her to calm down. As well, like I said, since Blade is Moon Knight, he's the avatar of Khonshu, and so through Blade, Khonshu makes himself known and basically goes up to Valkyrie and says, "Has Asgard changed so much that you guys don't even recognize my avatar?" And what I love is that the only people that can actually see Khonshu are Valkyrie and Blade. To everyone else, it's just empty air. And so as Valkyrie starts talking with Khonshu, all of them just are looking at this and thinking, is she talking to her imaginary friend? But ultimately, Khonshu is able to basically speak on the group's behalf and does convince Valkyrie to let them in. And so Valkyrie does let them in, though Blade warns everyone not to touch anything. As such, they go inside, and New Asgard is just as ornate and big as Old Asgard, as apparently they set themselves up in a large canyon. I'm guessing maybe, well, not the Grand Canyon, but some large canyon, and thus they've been staying there ever since. Although, and apparently they've been living well, as when Valkyrie lets them further in, the group ends up hearing music and rock and so forth, and when they step inside, they see what's left of Asgard, as everybody is just partying it up, as they're all just as everybody's dancing, drinking, eating, and just having a merry old time, because, well, it's Asgard. This is what they're used to, and if this is their home, they're gonna live it up as best as they can. As such, Valkyrie continues leading the group through, but the group does little by little split off. The first one to leave is the Red Guardian, who gets invited by a group of Asgardians to come sit and eat with them. And, well, basically, the Red Guardian decides to take them up on this offer because he could use the company, and he does want to remember his daughter. And so he does sit down, eat, and have a mug of mead to try and remember those that have been lost. However, the second one to part from the group is Kamala. As you see, well, if this is New Asgard, they have to have a king, and so Thor is the king here. Only when Kamala sees him, he doesn't seem to be joining the revelry. He's instead sitting on his throne, just leaning on his hand, not reacting to anything. As such, Kamala tries running up to him and tries beseeching him to help, let them use his ship. But then Valkyrie stops Kamala and reveals that Thor is not doing well. Ever since the incident in Wakanda, any fight that he had is just gone. He's broken. There is nothing left. There is basically nothing left. And so for the last 5 years, he's just been kind of out. Basically the lights are on, but nobody's home. And so even though he's technically the ruler of this place, ultimately he's just a figurehead. And I don't mean that in the sense he's a puppet. I just mean that he just doesn't do anything. However, as the group sees that, the question is still raised: if Thor is out of commission, then how is New Asgard's prospering as it is? Clearly, someone's got to be supplying everything, and if it's not the king, who is it? And Valkyrie says that the supplier for all their food has been the Queen of Sokovia, which confuses everybody because Sokovia should have been nuked during the events of Civil War. At which point Valkyrie steps aside as the Queen introduces herself. And the group sees that it's Wanda Maximoff. Naturally, this results in everyone going on the offensive, which causes almost all the Asgardians to point their weapons at Kamala, but Kamala basically tells them that she's the Queen of the Dead. She's been the one that's been hunting them this whole time, and she's the one that's been hurting them. But Wanda tries calming Kamala down, and she basically begins explaining what's going on. Because the thing is, when the group sees her, she doesn't look like a zombie. She looks fine. The reason why she says that she looks fine is because after a while, apparently, as her reality-bending powers were becoming stronger and were coming back to her, she was able to use them to basically reorder her mind so that she was, for the most part, like herself again. She could think, she could work, and basically, for all intents and purposes, she was herself again, and thus she was able to reorder reality and fix herself. The only problem is that she can't exactly do this for everybody else. She claims that her powers are too limited, too small, and that in order for her to gain that much, and the only way that she could have gotten any more of that power was through the Infinity Stones. But they were destroyed, their energies dispersed across the earth. But there is one being that is keeping her powers from her. And Kamala, of course, thinks that she's kind of talking out of her ass, because again, if she really wanted to help people, why would she keep sending zombies after them to fucking kill them? But the thing is, Wanda reveals that the reason why she did that wasn't because she was after the transmitter like Kamala thought. No, it turns out the one that she was really hunting for was Kamala herself. Basically, Wanda believes that if Kamala's powers are added to her own, then it would give her the extra boost in order to be able to use her whole reality bending trick across the whole world and heal everyone. And I say heal in air quotes because here's the thing, she may look normal, but she ain't. She is very much the Queen of the Dead, and she reveals that her kindness towards the Asgardians, not good. It's not good at all. I've been saying, well, whatever. Basically, it turns out that all the food that she's been supplying, it's not good food. As she waves her hand and her reality powers sweep over the entire room, and it turns out all this great food and meat that everyone's been drinking and feasting on, it's zombie flesh, zombie arteries, zombie organs, zombie brains. They have been basically chowing down on zombie food, and all the Asgardians have been exposing themselves to the virus. And it turns out that so has the Red Guardian. As once the illusion fades, he realizes that what he thought was basically a giant cut of either a turkey or a pig, I don't know, was in fact a zombie hand, and he ate quite a few fingers. So yeah, the Asgardians all turn into zombies, and once Wanda reveals that she wants Kamala, she in turn drops the illusions on her and reveals her full zombie visage, which in turn causes the group to just go on the offensive and start fighting the zombie Asgardians as best as they can. Unfortunately, this battle is easier said than done because they are quite literally in the lion's den right now. All the Asgardians are zeroing in on them, and even zombified, these are some very powerful beings, and their leader is a woman who can fucking alter reality to her whim. They are cooked. They are fried. Shish kebab. They are doomed. So ultimately their best option is to cut and run. As such, everyone does their best to fight, but unfortunately in the process, more of their numbers end up getting lost. As the FBI agent ends up getting killed, the ninja guy ends up dying, which I forgot. They said his name too, and I forgot it. As he tried defending the FBI guy, but then basically had all of his limbs shattered. So that's fucking lovely. And eventually all the zombies seem to crowd around Thor, so it looks like he's doomed. But eventually the group realizes they got to get out of here, as Valkyrie, who is the only one who is not infected, ends up joining up with the group as they all run downstairs with the zombie horde following after. Unfortunately, though, while Kamala is helping Alexei get away, the zombie virus is overtaking him more and more, and so when the group does eventually manage to find the ship that that the group needs, well, he tells Kamala that he needs to stay behind, and while Kamala doesn't want to listen, well, it takes us for the zombie. Well, once the zombie virus fully infects him, that's when Kamala realizes that as much as she doesn't want to, she's got to leave Alexei behind. And as such, she uses her powers to push Alexei back into the crowd of zombies as she and the rest of the group get on the ship and try and fly away. But unfortunately, they don't even manage to get past the hangar bay when Wanda arrives on the scene and uses her powers to pull the ship back down. As she basically calls out to Kamala and tells her that she needs her, that with their powers combined, they could heal the world. Then the air starts getting a little staticky. Electricity is flowing everywhere. Hair stands on end. Something seems to be going wrong, weird. And that's when a call of thunder comes down. And who should arrive on the scene but the god of thunder himself, Thor. Yeah, Thor basically overheard what was going on, and once everything went to hell in Asgard, he actually began to stir, and while it looked like he wasn't reacting when the zombies attacked, clearly he was paying attention, and seeing the Queen of the Dead right there in front of him, it manages to stir what little life is left in him as he begins using his raw power to just fight against Wanda, and it's a badass fight. As while clearly Wanda has him outclassed, he is just doing everything in his power to just keep her down and away from the group. As she keeps blasting at him, he keeps throwing lightning at her way, he keeps blasting through the hordes. It's just so damn awesome. I can't do it justice. But while the group is watching in awe, Thor pretty much tells them they need to go now. And while Kamala is not willing to go because, well, they need to save Thor, Thor needs to come with them. He's the last surviving Avenger. He pretty much just tells Kamala, "You're an Avenger now, little one. Make it count." Basically, make it count. I'm probably ruining that quote, but basically, he just tells them they need to leave. And while the group isn't exactly happy to do this, they do manage to escape. Oh yeah, also Zemo died. Yeah, Zemo basically got bisected in the battle too. I forgot all about that. I knew someone else died. Eventually Thor's sacrifice does manage to allow the group to escape New Asgard, and they do manage to fly up into the sky, and sure enough, they do manage to breach the outer atmosphere, and they do manage to break through the energy field that the Infinity Stones created around the Earth. And sure enough, it allows the electrical signals to get through, and thus the group realizes they've made it. As such, Kamala brings out the transmitter, and Valkyrie is able to sync the transmitter up with a ship. And so, after everything is said and done, all that needs to be done is just Kamala to hit a button, and it'll send a signal right to the Nova Corps, and they could offer help. And so, for a minute, everyone's like, "Oh yeah, we did it! We saved the day! Everything's all good!" But after Kamala hits the button for the signal, well, not even a minute later, the Nova Corps show up just like that. There's like a whole fleet of ships right there. And at first, Kamala's like, "Oh wow, they really made record time." Only for Valkyrie to say, "This doesn't make sense." Even with this transmitter, the fastest a signal can get from Earth to the Nova Corps would be weeks, and it would be a while before they actually received any help. Meaning that the Nova Corps didn't just send help after they got the signal. They were already here. They are fully aware of Earth's current status, and they are quarantining it. Yep, the Nova Corps has no intention of saving the Earth. Instead, their policy, just cordon it off and not let anything in or out. And well, that unfortunately means that that they're not going to let even survivors get through, as they send out a radio signal right to the ship, and basically order them to return to their home planet of origin, or they're going to be vaporized. And the group, well, they realize just how bad things are as the Nova Corps keeps counting down, and they just realize, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? There's no one to help us. What can we do? And the episode ends as the Nova Corps reaches zero. So, yeah. I think this is a decent episode. Once again, this really does continue to hammer down the "we are screwed" factor that Marvel Zombies has been doing throughout this entire miniseries, as we once more continue to establish just how much of a threat that the Scarlet Witch is in this reality. And I kind of like that we do learn a little bit more about why she's doing what she's doing. As I do actually like that among the zombies, she's probably the one on top, which makes sense. The power of the Scarlet Witch is supposed to be able to reshape reality to her whim. We've seen that with the Scarlet Witch in even the main MCU timeline. Her powers are her powers are very well done, and she has a lot she can do. Her powers are very flexible. There, I said the word. There, I said it. You can get past my stuttering. But her powers are very flexible in the main MCU timeline. In WandaVision, she converted an entire town into a sitcom through will alone. So I kind of like the idea that she was able to use her powers to, in some ways, heal herself. That her powers actually did restore enough of her faculties that she was able to basically finish the job and while not being able to completely undo the zombie virus, at least give her enough of a control again so that she's not just a ravenous monster who's a slave to her hunger. I do find that interesting. Unfortunately, though, it's clear that she's still not exactly well in the head, as just like in the main MCU timeline, who was once a kind, caring person who went through hardship and turmoil, but ultimately came out stronger, has now been converted into a monster, as she basically believes that she's the only one who can heal the world just like her, and the only way that she can do that is if she goes and gets Kamala. And instead of, finding Kamala and just saying, "I want to talk to you," she instead is just releasing hordes upon hordes of zombies after her, because that's the sane thing to do. That's how you get the girl with magic light powers to listen to you, by just, sending zombies to go and attack her friends, kill anyone that gets in their way. Just, that's the good thing, right? That makes you a hero, Wanda. I'm surprised that you aren't the best Avenger right now. Yeah, it's stupid. It's very stupid. It's twisted logic, I will give you credit. I do kind of like that, as it showcases that even if her mind is healed, it's not healed in a sense. As odds are, in her current state, she genuinely does believe that people don't need to be healed, but at least have to be put into a position where they can at least think. Kind of like what we saw with Okoye in earlier episodes, as she's clearly not friendly, but she can at least verbalize and talk, unlike the majority of the other zombies that we've been seeing. So odds are that whatever Wanda has planned for the rest of the world, it's not going to exactly fix everything, it'll just make things a little bit more tolerable, if that makes any sense. On top of that, this episode once more continues just throwing the we are screwed factor in our faces with more character deaths, not only as again, like I said, the FBI agent whose name I still don't remember. I am so sorry. And the ninja guy, again, that's on me. I'm so sorry. Are both end up on the chopping block. Zemo. Well, quite frankly, he was a sacrificial lamb in any sense. He was a dumbass villain and a jackass. I'm not going to lose sleep over him dying. That one's sad. But I think the one I think hurts the most is the Red Guardian. Not because it's some grand heroic sacrifice or anything, but by just how offhand it is. This isn't him doing one final grand stand to try and save everybody. This isn't him putting his life on the line because everybody else needs him. This is him just falling for a trap. He wanted to sit. He lost people that were close to him. He wanted to try and keep fighting for their sake. And then in the next episode, he's tricked into eating zombie flesh, and thus he gets transformed into a zombie against his own will. And while to his credit, he goes down fighting, as up until the zombie virus completely overtook him, he still tried helping everybody and tried defending them as best as he could. It's just kind of sad that we basically have this whole character arc for him, and then he just goes out without even a grand farewell. Instead he turns into a zombie, turns on the group, and they basically have to abandon him. It's honestly it's honestly sad, it's honestly sad. But whereas the other ones did at least feel like that their deaths had more meaning, this one feels like it has no meaning. It's just a pointless sacrifice. Even the deaths of Riri and Kate Bishop felt like they had more weight to them, because they were at least they died trying to do the right thing. And you could argue the same thing with Alexei here, but again, it's not a grand battle. It's not a grand battle that gets him. It's not fighting to his last breath against a horde of zombies. It's just that he ate the wrong thing, and it's kind of a sad way to go out. Not even sad as in, oh, I'm gonna miss him, but sad as in, oh, he deserved a better death. Like, that's just my opinion on that matter. So in that regard, I do find that one to be kind of the most disappointing out of the deaths. But with that said, the episode does still have its fair share of badass moments. I do like, once again, the world building, as I like that we saw how the Asgardians grew, and I like that we got to see that. I like that we kind of do see how the events of the Wakanda incident affected Thor in this reality, and why he hasn't been an active force. Honestly, I genuinely thought that he was going to be in the Valley of the Fallen Gods. Excuse me one second. Dog stuff again, sorry. But yeah, like I said, I like that we kind of got to see that with Thor, which I think also led to a very badass final hurrah as he actually charged up with all of whatever energy he had left to fight Scarlet Witch. And that's actually something else something I actually thought about while I was on that little pause, is that I kind of like how what we see with Thor in this reality is a very nice, more heroic mirror to what we saw in the Prime MCU timeline. As if you remember well, after the events of Infinity War, when Thor failed to stop Thanos and half of the universe was obliterated, he just went into a depressive state. He wasn't even a king. He drunk himself into a stupor. He got fat. He just spent his days playing video games and just basically living in self-pity about all that he had not accomplished, and all the people whose lives who were lost because he couldn't go for the head, so to speak. So to kind of have a much more dark version of that in this reality, to show him not as a man who's been beaten down, but who's just been completely broken, it actually makes it even more sad, especially since in this world, he was actually scarred. Like, this entire portion of his face is burned. In the Prime timeline, he's missing one of his eyes, but in this case, it wasn't because it got plucked out or cut out by his sister, it's because he's just blind in that eye. It's honest to God sad, but in turn, it's what makes his final sacrifice that much more, because at the end of everything, he realizes this is the only way to stop. This is the only way. These people are carrying hope with them, and even if he has given up, he can't just abandon them in their time of need. And I love that. It's nice, it's great, and while by the end you can still tell he's a broken man, he's at least ready to play his life. He's at least willing to lay his life down if it means that other people will live. It's again really damn good, and I dig it. On top of that, I like that this episode does actually give more context to what happened 5 years prior after the events of the original What If episode. And I do like, again, how it was basically their version of Infinity War, except in this case, it had zombies, and unfortunately the number of heroes fighting Thanos was even smaller than before, since, well, the majority of heroes have been infected with a zombie virus, and the only heroes that were present on the scene were a guy who could shoot webs out of his wrist, a guy dressed as a panther, and a floating head. All of those things aren't exactly helpful when fighting against a guy who has the power of the fucking universe on his fist. So that in turn is actually, so that obviously you could, so yeah, you can tell they were kind of screwed. And while there are brief moments of hope throughout it, by the end, the only reason that anyone claimed a victory was because T'Challa had to sacrifice himself in order to destroy Thanos, which unfortunately resulted in much larger consequences with that whole energy sphere that's surrounding the Earth. Which, while I'm on this topic, I'm going to go on a brief tangent here. Like I said, the prologue for this episode was done via narration. As while we did witness it happen, the framing device for why we saw this flashback was like I said, Peter Parker in the present day was telling it to some unseen newcomer at Kamartaj. But the thing is, the reason why this was chosen as the storytelling method was because, unfortunately, before recording for these episodes could occur, well, that's when Chadwick Boseman, the actor who played T'Challa, had sadly passed away. And while they were able to get enough voice lines out of him to do What If, well, they clearly didn't. They didn't have time to schedule Marvel Zombies before his unfortunate passing. And, well, I am going to use this opportunity to talk about something that's kind of bugged me about Marvel Entertainment ever since Chadwick Boseman's death. So the thing is, after Chadwick Boseman's death, it is well known that they killed off T'Challa in the MCU, and the thing is, I'm still not against them doing that. I think that them doing that is a nice way of honoring the actor. And the send-off they gave to T'Challa and his actor was, I think, a really damn good one. Black Panther Wakanda Forever, I think, is just a superb movie. It feels like a great memorial to Chadwick Boseman while still being able to continue the story and giving everything the significant weight it needed. It was a very emotional story with great stakes, great character writing, and honestly a very emotional finale with Shuri that still manages to hit me right here. The thing is, though, Marvel decided that the MCU wasn't the only place that T'Challa would be gone from. Because, for some dumb reason that I cannot comprehend, Marvel decided that after Chadwick Boseman's death, no one would play T'Challa in anything. Oh, don't misunderstand. T'Challa is still around. If you read Marvel Comics, you can still see T'Challa as the Black Panther. You can still see him in certain comic books, and if you look back at like any games or shows that were made prior to Chadwick Boseman's death, you can still see T'Challa in those just doing his own thing. But for some reason I don't really get, they decided that the only way to honor Chadwick Boseman was by making it so that no one could play T'Challa anymore. He's just gone. That's Chadwick Boseman's role now. It can never be played by anyone again. And I'm just gonna say right now, that's fucking bullshit. Look, I was not against T'Challa being killed off in the MCU. I'm still not against it. I actually, like I said, I feel like that role in the MCU was Chadwick's, and I'm kind of glad that when he died, they also killed off T'Challa and did so in a very respectful way that still honored the memory of both the actor and the character. I liked that, and they found ways to continue the legacy, especially with Revelation that T'Challa had a kid who shared his name. It allows them to recast the character without replacing the character, and I liked that. I thought it was good, and it gives us hope for the future about T'Challa, possibly about some kind of version of T'Challa still existing and coming back while still honoring the legacy of who came before. But to pretty much just go nuclear and pretty much just say, nope, we're not letting anyone play that role now, it's Chadwick Boseman's, I think is the stupidest thing that Marvel could have done. There's honoring the legacy of an actor, and then there's basically being stupid. Guess which one this is? I think it's stupid. And so basically for them to just pretty much just go, well, we're never going to have anyone play this role again, I think is very limiting and dumb. And before you say, well, he was the first. His movie was one of the. Black Panther was one of the first first superhero movies with an African American led actor who made big in the box office. To which I respond with, so what? There are plenty of superhero movies with iconic actors that have gone big, and the thing is, you don't expect those roles to be just singled out to one character. Let me put it this way: Kevin Conroy is my voice for Batman. Whenever I read a comic, whenever I read anything with Batman, his is the voice I hear when I read The Dark Knight. So how would you feel if after his tragic death, DC pretty much said, well, you're not going to see Bruce Wayne Batman anymore because that role was Kevin Conroy's? That would be the stupidest thing you could think of. The thing is, again, like I said, I understand wanting to honor the legacy of the actor, but the wrong way to do it isn't by limiting the potential for the characters he's played. If anything, I think that does the opposite. It basically is not. It doesn't feel like it's honoring the actor. It feels like that they're basically just going overboard. Even Chadwick Boseman's family thinks this is a dumb decision. They do not think that them basically saying nobody else can play this role was a good idea, and they have objected to it. But basically, Marvel does not give a shit. They basically just saying, nope, no one's playing this anymore. And I find that to be dumb, especially in the medium of animation. I understand. By animation, it doesn't need to be another actor. And again, we've seen multiple versions of all these different superheroes and characters across all these different mediums, and many of them were played by different actors. And some of them were even characters of color. Hell. In this show, we have a different Blade that is not. Hold on one second. Sorry, I was blanking on his name. This Blade is not played by Wesley Snipes. Why wouldn't he? Why would he? It's a different version of Blade. So are you telling? So here's the thing. Should Wesley Snipes be exclusive to the role of Blade just because he's a black guy? Of course not. Blade is a fictional character, and any African American guy, any African American actor, should be allowed to play him, because why wouldn't they? It'd be stupid for them to just limit it to just one actor. And I'm not putting that. And I'm not trying to say that to put down Wesley Snipes. Wesley Snipes is a great actor, and there's a reason why his version of Blade is so iconic. It's just if you apply the same logic that Marvel's applying to T'Challa to any other character, regardless of their skin color, nationality, orientation, or whatever, you would think it was stupid too. The point of being an actor and playing a fictional character is that you bring your own version of that character to life. How you play it, how you're directed, all of that is supposed to come together to create a unique vision. And so by limiting the amount of people who can play it just because you want to honor one actor's memory, I think is exceedingly limiting, stupid, and basically making it as exclusive as possible. It's actually, and in fact, I think it actually bars opportunities in filmmaking. As a result, I think that this whole policy with T'Challa is one of the dumbest things I've ever seen, and unfortunately, it's an example of someone trying to be. I don't like using this word because it's been turned into a slur. It's the wrong way of trying to be woke, and I don't like saying it like that because because ultimately people are going to think that and say, oh, you don't like the PC culture and all that. That's not my viewpoint at all. I've hopefully showcased through various vlogs that I do want to stand up for the rights of minorities and people who basically aren't myself, because I am a cisgender straight white guy. Clearly, I'm part of the privilege, even if I'm not fully aware of it. And so I want to try and use whatever little privilege I have to try and make sure that the people who do deserve the help need it, because those people have just as much right to exist and live as I do, and the fact that they are treated as less than nothing because they don't fit into some kind of preconceived mold is the stupidest thing that I've ever heard. My point in all this is just that if you're trying to be progressive, you're failing, Marvel. You're failing. This is the wrong way to do it, and I think that it's just going to ultimately, and I know I'm not the only one that feels this way. So I'm sorry, I know that that's a completely different subject for Marvel Zombies, but I wanted to talk about it. And the fact that the fact that what they didn't, and the fact that that this episode featured T'Challa and they had to find a way to kill him off because of that mandate, I think is stupid. Although I will give credit, it was a badass death and he went out like a hero. So I will at least give you that. I just don't like the reason why they did it. So, yeah. Gonna call bullshit on that. But my long-ass tangent aside, the episode itself is still fine. I do think, like I said, it's this one. Like I said, this one definitely gets heavy on the shock factor with character deaths and so forth. I do like that we learn a bit more about Wanda and what her grand scheme is. I like that we do see the building blocks for later for later plot points being thrown in there with the stuff with Kamar-Taj, Spidey, and Scott Lang, and them being fully aware of the Scarlet Witch and her creating an army of the undead. And the ending of the episode revealing that the Nova Corps is fully aware of what's going on Earth, but have instead opted to just quarantine Earth instead of trying to help it. It actually adds a whole other shock factor, especially as we see our heroes basically in their crosshairs with the Nova Corps telling them go back or you will die. So that adds a whole other layer of what the hell that I think really helps sell the episode. And overall, I do still like it. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. Again, apologies for the long ass rant. Apologies that I stuttered at various points, but regardless, I hope you're able to sit through and tolerate this video until now, because well, next week we are going to be wrapping up Marvel Zombies, at least for this season, as we get to episode 4 and see if our heroes can truly conquer the armies of the undead. So till then, hope you have a good Wednesday and take care.